Well, we come tonight, and Lord willing, we will look at Numbers chapters 8 and 9. Now, what's unusual, as we will find in Numbers and Deuteronomy, is that they don't try to make things fit chronologically. So you got to really know sort of the chronological order of Exodus. And then you sort of got to know Leviticus is 1 month after the book of Exodus. And so as we were going through Leviticus, certain things happened during that time. For example, the cleansing of the priest and so forth, and them going over all the sacrifices. And they gave some information for the future, like if you come across a leper or somebody with a bright spot on their body, here's how you deal with it. But what's going to happen is we're going to find out there's a lot of meat that still has to be put on the bones of the book of Leviticus and the laws given in the book of Exodus. And so chapters 8 and 9, again, are sort of not really in chronological order, like we same problem we had last week in chapter 7. And so he wants to go back now at the beginning of Numbers 8 and talk about the lampstand again. Now, you remember the lampstand. We taught quite a while. Matter of fact, I think probably a whole night on it or something. And back in Exodus 25, verse 31 to 40. And we learned the intricacy of this lampstand, this menorah, we would call it. And it has 7 branches. Now, some people get confused because they see one that has 8 branches, really 9, because the Hanukkah candlestick has an extra one that's sort of the lighter of the other one. So usually we'll have a little one down below or in front sticking out, a little confusing. But it's 8 because it took 8 days for God to purify new oil, but God didn't let the oil run out. And this is the intertestamental period between our Old Testament and New Testament. And it's a story of the Maccabees and how they overthrew the corrupt system that had taken over. And God gave them power and guerrilla warfare, and they got rid of the enemy, and they rededicated the temple because it had all kinds of pagan idols, and it was just horrendous. But it was a picture of the Antichrist and how what he's going to do to the temple. But this is the original lampstand that, by the way, evidently, you could put it in wrong, and you didn't know it. So this is what we're going to learn in these first 4 verses here. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you arrange the lampstands, the 7 lamps shall give light in front of the lampstand." And Aaron did so. He arranged the lamps to face towards the front of the lampstand, as the Lord had commanded Moses. Now this workmanship of the lampstand, remember, it was hammered gold. It has shafts of flowers. It was hammered work, according to the pattern which the Lord had shown Moses. So he made the lampstand. And so evidently, and we didn't know this earlier because it sounded like it was sort of even, but there was clearly some part of the lampstand that was more light was shining from one side of it than the other. How? I don't know. And evidently, Aaron didn't know either. And God said, hey, the last time you set it down and tore it up, I just want you to know that you got it wrong. And I don't want you to get it wrong in the future. Make sure the front is facing towards the inner part, obviously to give light, but also it was backwards. And again, this is according to the pattern that Moses saw when he looked into heaven, and he saw the actual one in heaven. We do learn later in Revelation chapter 1, verse 20, the mystery of the 7 stars, which you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands which you saw are the 7 churches. Remember, later on we find in Revelation that the incense is actually our prayers. And here we learn the candlestick actually is the churches. And we didn't know this, but there's an angel that watches over every church. We're going to have a Calvary Chapel Los Alamitos angel. Possibly. I don't know. That's sort of what he's saying here. You got a matching seven angels. Now, I do know from Hebrews, we all have guardian angels, right? That are watching over us. So evidently some of them have charge over the church. And so again, this is one piece that was hammered out into, it was just miraculous. It happened. Now, this is one of the pieces that was displayed in Rome as having been taken from Israel to Rome, along with the two trumpets, which we're going to talk about next week. And we'll show you that picture then. But again, the important part was you missed the pattern. You missed the pattern. So remember in Exodus 25:9, he says, according to all that I show you, that is the pattern of the tabernacle, of the pattern of the furnishings, just so you shall make it. And then in chapter 25:40, and see to it that you make them according to the pattern which was shown to you on the mountain. And then in Exodus 26:30, and you shall raise up the tabernacle according to the pattern which you were shown on the mountain. So God is very specific. And it was not an idea that it was sort of loosey-goosey, whatever you feel like, do it. No. Even to the point that there was one side of the lampstand that was the right side showing out. I don't think it was completely obvious, but yet if you take a moment to look at it, and probably Moses had to help out to make sure you get that right. And the spiritual significance of that, I don't know, that the church is a light and shouldn't be dimmed, I guess, in some way. Maybe that's the New Testament. I don't know. But that's it. That's the point. Now we're going to look in verses 5 through 26, the cleansing of the Levites. And you say, we've already done that. I know, but we're going to go back. Last time we saw it in Leviticus 8 and 9. Boy, it was quite detailed couple of chapters. So this evidently happened after this, because I'll show you why. In verse 5 through 7, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take the Levites from among the children of Israel and cleanse them ceremonially. Thus you shall do to them to cleanse them. Sprinkle water of purification on them, number 1. Number 2, let them shave all their body. And number 3, let them wash their clothes and so make themselves clean. Now you might remember back in Leviticus chapters 8 and 9 that Moses is the one that cleansed them, or Aaron is the one that cleansed them. They just had to sit there and let their bodies be washed. But this time around, he's saying there's another cleansing, and this is the one where you do it to yourself. And of course, we understand that, right? In justification and sanctification, that Christ did it for us. He's the one who washed us in the water of the word. He washed us in his blood. I remember that in Revelation 1, the end of verse 5-6, where it talks about us being priests and kings unto our God, or a kingdom of priests. It says, and he washed us with his blood and made us kings and priests unto him forever and ever. So he's the one. But then secondarily, we know that sanctification, this is the will of God, your sanctification, and this time that you present your own body in a sanctified and honorable way. That you understand the weakness of your flesh and you keep your flesh from being dishonorable, but honorable. And then, of course, that's 1 Thessalonians 4, and then 1 Thessalonians 5 says, now may the God of peace himself sanctify you entirely. So the ultimate sanctification, God's going to complete it. But there is a part as we walk through this life, just like Jesus washed their feet, right? Peter said, wash all of me. You've already been clean to the word that I've spoken to you. All you need is your feet being washed. And so it appears that this is sort of the thing that, hey, there is a cleansing, but this is what you do. Now, I'll tell you, there was no shaving of the head of the priest in Leviticus, was there? So this is something that is similar. In Leviticus, remember who got their head shaved? The person that was cleansed from their leprosy. Remember when they were cleansed from their leprosy, they gave certain sacrifices, and one of them is they shaved their whole body. And then in Numbers, somebody else shaved their whole body. That was somebody that made the vow of the Nazarite, right? When they ended their vow, they shaved all their body. So we're seeing some interesting parallels here. But remember in Exodus 29:4, Aaron and his sons you shall bring to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and you shall wash them with water. Do you remember? This was different in Exodus and then in Leviticus. Now we are going to learn, again, it's a growing revelation here. So don't get surprised. This is going to come up again. In Numbers chapter 19, he's going to say, by the way, when you do that washing, there has to be the ashes of a red heifer. Now, you guys have heard the stories of the red heifer, right? It's a big deal often in the news because the Jews for years have been trying to make this perfect red heifer, but as soon as they think it gets to the age, boop, white hair comes out, and then they got to start over. And anyway, they say they got it in Texas, then another group said they got it in Montana. Now, there's some Jews that swear they have it in Israel, but nobody can see it. So, it's hard to know. But the real Semitic Jews say it wouldn't matter because we would have to have the original ashes from Moses and Aaron to mix with new ashes of a red heifer for it to really be potent enough to cleanse the Levitical priests or whatever. I don't know. So obviously the Antichrist is going to take care of all those details when he sets himself upon the tabernacle. It's interesting that later on in Ezekiel 36:25, the Lord prophesying, then I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean. I will cleanse you in all your filthiness and from all your idols. And Jesus has done it, didn't he? So you remember in Leviticus 14:9, the lepers were cleansed and they shaved their bodies. And then the Nazarites, we just saw it in Numbers chapter 6, verse 9 and 18, where they shaved their whole bodies. So we see some similarities, but at the same time, we see some differences. So this must have been sometime after the original cleansing that Aaron and Moses did for those priests. Now we're in verse 18 through 15, and now he's going to go through this large, again, ceremony of the cleansing of the Levites. And he says here that you'll take the young bull and make a grain offering, and fine flour, you'll mix it with oil. You shall make another young bull as a sin offering, and shall the Levites before the tabernacle of meeting. You shall gather together the whole congregation of Israel. You shall bring the Levites before the Lord. The children of Israel shall lay their hands on the Levites. This is interesting. The whole children of Israel, probably the leaders from each tribe. And in verse 11, and Aaron shall offer the Levites before the Lord like a wave offering from the children of Israel. This is interesting. It sounds like that Aaron almost grabs the bundle of new Levites and starts swaying with them back and forth. And he's lifting them up like a wave offering, like a chunk of meat. Remember how Aaron did that? Here he's doing it with the actual priest. It looks like it. And then they may perform the work of the Lord. Verse 12, and the Levites shall lay their hands on the heads of the young bull, and you shall offer one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering to the Lord. Again, transference of their sins onto the bull to make an atonement for the Levites. Verse 13, you shall stand the Levites before Aaron and his sons and then offer them like a wave offering to the Lord. Again, in verse 14, thus you shall separate the Levites from among the children of Israel, and the Levites shall be mine. After that, the Levites shall go to the service of the tabernacle of meeting and shall cleanse them and offer them like a wave offering. So a lot of wave offering going on there. And it sounds like it's the actual people that are being waved around. And again, you go to Israel today to the Wailing Wall, and you will see them swaying. And maybe that was sort of a wave offering, if you would, while they're praying. I don't know. It's somewhere along the line became the custom. I think it's probably not good for you to do anything that much in a row. Any one motion that much in a row can't be good for you. But anyway, that's another point. Now, up to this point, God has mentioned a roundabout that he had a different plan for who would be the priest and had to cancel it. And we've talked about that. But here, he's making it clear. First time, in Numbers chapter 8, verse 16 to 19, for they are wholly given to me from among the children of Israel. I have taken them for myself instead of all who opened the womb, and the firstborn of all the children of Israel. For all the firstborn among the children of Israel are mine, both man and priest. On that day I struck all the firstborn of the land of Egypt. I sanctified them to myself. I have taken the Levites instead of all the firstborn of the children of Israel. And I have given the Levites as a gift to Aaron and his sons from among the children of Israel to do the work of the children of Israel in the tabernacle of meeting and to make atonement for the children of Israel, that there no plague among the children of Israel when the children of Israel come near the sanctuary. So he says here plainly, my choice of A did not happen. That was to take from every tribe the firstborn. Now, you do the math. That would have been a lot of priests. That would have been a lot of priests, because the firstborn child of every family becomes the priest. But then God said, okay, since that's not going to happen, you're going to give, and then you give that token amount of money, and then you also give a sacrifice in their place. You guys remember that? Tom, I'm cutting in and out. Are you playing around with it back there? Stop it. And so what happens here is plan B is a lot less priest, really. And it's a totally different formula in that he chooses just one tribe. And when he goes back to those when Moses said, stop worshiping this golden idol, and then he smashed it up and burned it and made them all drink of it. And then they had the war and 3,000 souls died. And then God said, okay, the Levites are going to be it, not the firstborn of every family. And so you can remember back in Numbers chapter 3, verse 40 to 51, he goes over this about the firstborn male child. Again, he makes it really clear. We just covered that in Numbers 3. But then he also says here in verse 20 something rather interesting. He says here, then the Lord, in Numbers 18:20, he says, then the Lord said to Aaron, you shall have no inheritance in the land, nor shall you have any portion among them. I am your portion and your inheritance among the children of Israel. So in chapter 18, he's going to give us more information on this by saying, by the way, when we go into the land, you guys don't have any. I'm your portion. You don't get land. So I think that, again, might have come as a little bit of a shock to them. And God says that make sure nobody else tries to do these tasks of the Levites unless a plague breaks out on them and they die. Well, and remember who had a plague come on him? King Uriah, when he tried to offer some incense, right? A plague broke out on him. Well, in Numbers chapter 8, verse 20 to 22 now, then Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the children of Israel Israel did to the Levites, according to all the Lord had commanded Moses concerning the Levites, so the children of Israel did to them. And the Levites purified themselves. Double down it, make it clear here. They washed their clothes. And Aaron presented them like a wave offering before the Lord, and Aaron made atonement for them to cleanse them. After the Levites went to do their work in the tabernacle of meeting before Aaron and his sons, the Lord commanded Moses concerning the Levites, so they did to them. So verse 20 to 22 basically says they did what he told them to do in the earlier verses. Now we're going to have another addition in verse 23 to 26. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, "This is what pertains to the Levites. From 25 years old and above, one may enter to perform the service and the work of the tabernacle of meeting. And at the age of 50, they shall cease performing this work and shall work no more. They may minister with their brethren in the tabernacle of meeting to attend to their needs, but they themselves shall not do the work. Thus you shall do to the Levites regarding their duties." So from age 25 to 50, they can participate in the work of the Levite. But at 50, they had to stop. Now, I know what you're saying. Bryan, we just covered this in chapter 4, verse 30. And you remember in chapter 4, verse 30, it said, "From 30 years old and above, even to 50 years old, you shall number them, everyone who enters the service to do the work of the tabernacle of meeting." So is the Bible a contradiction here? No. I think what happened is from 25 to 30 was their internship. And they can enter into the temples. They need to learn how to do the work of the temple. But they officially don't start the clock as a priest until they hit 30. Now, I just want to add another caveat to this also. Remember how old a regular Israelite, not of the tribe of Levi, was when he went into the military service? 20, right? So imagine if you were living amongst the Jews and all of the tribes are excited. "I'm 19 next year, man, I get to join our military." And you're a Levite going, "I can't do anything till I'm 25. Do you think that happened? I don't think it happened. I think what happened is one of two things. Either at 20, they began their school study, if you would, for 5 years. And then at 25, they started their internship. Or when it said men from 20 years and older can join the military, it really was counting up their training years from 20 to 25. And then at 25, they're an actual soldier. So just sort of reading between the lines here and trying to grasp what happened. But this is what we come up with as we look at this. There was definitely a training for years, an internship for years for the priest. But for sure, from 30 to 50 was their official 20-year service before they started getting their Social Security payments. At 50, whatever that was. Now, in chapter 9, he says, let's go talk about the Passover, because there's an issue here. Now, remember Exodus chapter 12. It has a whole chapter on the Passover. Remember, they were in Egypt, and God said the angel of death is coming, and you got to put the blood on the door post. Whoever has the blood, the angel of death will pass over. And the firstborn of all man and animal died that night who didn't have the faith. And of course, we know it would have been in the shape of a cross, right? You have the pan at the bottom of the door, and it says go to the top, and then go to the side and to the side with the blood. And so those who are covered in the blood of Christ, we know the Passover is good. And so he says here in chapter 9, because a whole year has gone by, and they've now landed on the first of the month again. The last time they landed on the first of the month, they were still in Egypt. But now they're coming around to the first month again. And so in chapter 9, verse 1 through 3, now the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. So not in Egypt anymore, in Sinai. In the first month of the second year, after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, let the children of Israel keep the Passover at its appointed time. On the 14th day of this month, the first month, at twilight. You shall keep it as it is appointed time. According to all its rites and ceremonies, you shall keep it. So the first month of the second year on the 14th day at twilight, right? At evening and morning are the first days. And then that would continue on, we know, from Exodus 12 for 7 days. That feast time would be going on. Now, in the New Testament, we know it's Jesus. It tells us in 1 Corinthians 5:7, therefore purge out the old leaven that you may be a new lump, since you truly are unleavened, for indeed Christ, our Passover, was sacrificed for us. And then in Romans 5:6, and when we were still without strength, in due time, the right time, the appointed time, the perfect time, I think it could even be translated, Christ died for the ungodly. The covering of the blood of Christ caused the judgment of God to pass over his people, even in the New Testament. And so in verse 4 and 5, and Moses told the children of Israel they should keep the Passover. And in verse 5, they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month at twilight in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all the Lord had commanded Moses, so the children of Israel did. So Moses told them the first time back in Egypt, they obeyed God. Now he's telling them again for the second time, and they're obeying God once again. In Sinai on the 14th day of the first month at twilight. But before that 14th day comes, there's a problem. And we learn about the problem in verse 6 through 12. Now, there was a certain men who were defiled by a human corpse. Their dad died, let's say. So they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and Aaron and said to them, and those men said to him, we have become defiled by a human corpse. Why are we kept from presenting the offering of the Lord at the appointed time among the children of Israel? And Moses said to them, I love this, it's going to happen a few times, stand still, that I may hear what the Lord will command concerning you. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, if any one of you or your posterity is unclean because of the corpse, or is far away on a journey, he may still keep the Lord's Passover. On the 14th day of the second month at twilight, they may keep it. So the 14th day, but not the first month, they got to bounce it to the second month. Remember from Leviticus, when somebody became ceremonial unclean, it took 8 days for them to become clean again. So they just said, we'll keep it on the 14th, we'll just bump it a month. And they shall eat it with the unleavened bread and the bitter herbs, and they shall leave none of it until morning, nor break one of its bones. According to the ordinance of the Passover, they shall keep it. So when they do it, it's not going to seem as momentous, because everybody else has already done it, and you're going to be about the only one in the neighborhood doing it. And so it's going to lose a little bit of its oomph because it's not on the right timing. But don't do any shortcuts. Don't do an abbreviated Seder. Do the whole thing. Don't cut it thin because it's on the next month. Now, I have to take my hat off to these guys. Because number one, they knew what had been spoken in Leviticus. Number two, they believed it and they took it to heart. Remember in Leviticus 22, verse 3, say to them, whoever of your descendants throughout your generations who goes near the holy things which the children of Israel dedicated to the Lord while he has uncleanness upon him, that person shall be cut off from my presence. I am the Lord. Now this is about being unclean, going in and giving an offering, but nevertheless, God's the same God. It's the same spirit of him saying, hey, we would go take Passover knowing that we're unclean. God can't honor that. He may even kill us. And so what do? I mean, you got 3 million people with all these varied things. How many people died and became unclean, do you think? I think probably quite a few with that large a group. But yet it was just this one person that made a note of it, or this one family that made a note of it. Now, just simply because we have this knowledge, when we are in 2 Chronicles chapter 30, verse 1 through, or in 2 Chronicles chapter 30, Hezekiah is trying to get the children of Israel back on track. And he's trying to tell them we need to serve the Lord. And he tells them, man, we got to get ready for Passover. And they don't. But yet, it didn't stop there. In chapter 30, verse 1 through 5, Hezekiah sent to all of Israel and Judah and also wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh that they should come to the house of the Lord at Jerusalem to keep the Passover to the Lord God of Israel. For the king and its leaders and all the assembly of Jerusalem had agreed to keep the Passover in the what? Second month. For they could not keep it in regular time because of this. A sufficient number of the priests had not consecrated themselves, nor had the people gathered together at Jerusalem. And a matter pleased the king and all the assembly, so they resolved to make a proclamation throughout Israel from Beersheba to Dan, that they should come and keep the Passover to the Lord, God of Israel, since they had not done it for a long time, as it was prescribed manner, in its prescribed manner. And skipping down to verse 15 of 2 Chronicles 30, then they slaughtered the Passover lambs on the 14th day of the second month. The priests and the Levites were ashamed and sanctified themselves and brought the burnt offerings to the house of the Lord. So the priests and the Levites knew it's like, this is wrong, this is sin, but yet that's where we're at spiritually. We are not faithfully keeping God's word. And even though we're going through this, I'm grieved that we're doing it not as the Lord prescribed. Now he says, if you're unclean or you're on a journey, then something like this could happen. And then he also mentions strangers, Gentiles, could come and partake of it also. Remember back in Exodus 12:48, when a stranger, Gentile, dwells with you and wants to keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised. Then let him come near and keep it, and he shall be as a native of the land, for no uncircumcised person shall keep it. So basically, if you want to be proselyted into Judaism and you want to get circumcised and become a Jew and start following the God of the Jew, then it's fine. Take up the Passover. Even though you're a Gentile, you're just like a Jew in God's eyes. But this is too much. It's not clarifying enough. So this is what we find in verse 13. We find a clarification on these things. So in verse 13, he says, but the man who is clean, he said a minute ago, if you're unclean or on a journey, do it in the second month. But now he comes back going, hold it. If the man is clean and is not on a journey and ceases to keep the Passover, that same person shall be cut off from among the people, because he did not bring the offering of the Lord at the appointed time, that the man shall bear his sin. So again, the journey and the traveling thing, and he comes back and he is clean, but yet he says, I'm not going to take of it because I've been journeying and traveling and it's just not working out for me to be a part of this year. No excuse. And then in verse 14, he says, now if the stranger dwells among you and would keep the Lord's Passover, he must do according to the rite of the Passover and according to its ceremony. And you shall have one ordinance both for the stranger and the native of the land. And I told you what those ordinances were in Exodus 12:48. We just read that. Well, we can finish here with a wonderful upnote in verse 15 to 23. Now, on the day that the tabernacle was raised up, the cloud covered the tabernacle. So now we're back in Exodus 40, right? Very last chapter of Exodus. The cloud covered the tabernacle and the tent of testimony. From evening until morning, it was above the tabernacle like the appearance of fire. So it was always. The cloud covered it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. Whenever the cloud was taken from above the tabernacle after the children of Israel would journey, and in the place where the cloud settled, there the children of Israel would pitch their tents. And at the command of the Lord, the children of Israel would journey. At the command of the Lord, they would camp. As long as the cloud stayed above the tabernacle, they remained encamped. Even when the cloud continued long time, many days above the tabernacle, the children of Israel kept the charge of the Lord, did not journey. So it was when the cloud was above the tabernacle only for a few days. According to the command of the Lord, they would remain encamped, and according to the command of the Lord, they would journey. So it was when the cloud remained only for an evening until morning. When the cloud was taken up in the morning, they would journey, whether by day or by night. Whenever the cloud was taken up, they would journey. Interesting. By day or by night, they would pick up their tent and start going when the fire or the cloud moved. Whether it was 2 days, a month, a year, that the cloud remained among the tabernacle, the children of Israel would remain encamped and not journey. And when it was taken up, they would journey. At the command of the Lord, they remained encamped, and in the command of the Lord, they journeyed. They kept their charge of the Lord and the command of the Lord by the hand of Moses. Was it really necessary to explain this in so many verses? 8 verses, 9 verses? It really wasn't. But when the Lord does that, like he did back in chapter 7, remember chapter 7? We did that just last week, right? You're all looking at me like, what? Chapter 7? Yeah, that was the numbering, what they all gave, remember? And it could have been the shortest chapter in the Bible. Instead, it was the second longest chapter in the Bible. Same here. So he's really making it clear. A big part of their success and obedience was their flexibility in following God. Whether it's a long time, and it's like, man, this is a long time we've been here. The place is starting to smell. Or a quick time, it's like, whoa, my wife just got the dishes out. Put them away. We got to go. In the middle of the night, hey, everybody wake up. It moved. We got to start packing up. Get the fires going. We got to get all packed up at night. Start moving at night or day. They were obedient. No matter how easy, no matter how hard, middle of the day or the middle of the night, they had a tender spirit in following the Lord. Just sort of a nice, refreshing note. Because we're not going to hear too many verses like this about Israel, are we? But this is one area that they obeyed God, and it brought him great delight. According to the command of the Lord, they remained encamped, and according to the command of the Lord, they journeyed. And the glory was there. You know, it's interesting. In Romans 9, I didn't get this in my notes. I have so many things that I don't put there, but it was interesting. It was sort of burning on my heart as I was driving on the way over here. He gives a list of 8 things of what makes a Jew a Jew. Because not everybody who's of Israel is of Israel, right? But you know, one of the first things, if not the first thing of the 8 that makes Israel Israel, is they received the glory. They received the glory. And then in John 1, what does it say? And we beheld what? His glory. The glory is the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. In Exodus 40, with the original part of this story that's now being repeated here, in verse 34 to 38, it says, Then the cloud covered the tabernacle of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And notice this, and Moses was not able to enter. Whoa! The tabernacle of meeting, because the cloud rested upon it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Even holy Moses couldn't get inside. And whenever the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle, the children of Israel would go onward in all their journeys. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not journey till the day they were taken up. For the cloud of the Lord was above the tabernacle by day, and the fire was over it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout these journeys. So you say, did this already happen? No, it didn't, because they're right now at Sinai. But he's just letting you know, by the way, in the history of Israel in the future, this is one thing they got right, and I'll tell you what, it's a big thing they got right. And boy, being in the will of God, I've often asked people who are living lives of sin, hey, can you pray me for what the will of God is? And I'm like, the will of God is that you're in the will of God. And then as you're in the will of God, now you can ask God, what is your will? But you can't ask God for what's your will when you're outside his will. You got to be in his will. Now you can ask, what is your will? And boy, that's a big thing people struggle with, isn't it? I remember getting out of college. Everybody was like, oh boy, what am I going to do now? And I can remember being in some very insecure places in my life. And when young people come to me going, man, what do I do, this or that? I'm like, oh, I hated that season of my life. Not knowing what the will of the Lord was, especially with so many options. But you know what I did learn is that when our hearts are always praying, as Jesus taught us, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. It's happening. And we really make no mistakes. God keeps us right there, right? I love that Proverbs 16. It says it's the man is supposed to make the plans, right? That's what God's desired, but it's still the Lord who's directing the path. And I love that. And so we will see a couple more of these glory times. Not always positive. One was as Solomon when he built the temple. He had an equal experience as they did at the time of the tabernacle. In 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 10 and 11, it says, and it came to pass when the priest came out of the holy places that the cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priest would not continue ministering because of the cloud, and the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. So similar type of thing. They all had to run for their lives. They couldn't remain. But then years later, when the children of Israel had been continually disobedient, and they were going to have to be in Babylon for 70 years, Ezekiel saw this spiritual thing happening in the spiritual realm. In Ezekiel 10, verse 3 through 4, it says, now the cherubim were standing on the south side of the temple when the man went in, and the cloud filled the inner court, and the glory of the Lord went up from the cherubim, passed over the threshold of the temple, and the house was filled with the cloud, and the court was full of the brightness of the Lord's glory. The story goes on in verse 18 and 19. Then that glory of the Lord departed from the threshold of the temple and stood over the cherubim. And the cherubim lifted their wings and mounted up from the earth in my sight. And when they went out, the wheels were beside them, and they stood at the door of the east gate of the Lord's house, and the glory of the God of Israel was above them. So they saw the glory of that temple depart. And of course, it was destroyed. The temple was destroyed at this time. Boy, the glory of the Lord, just having that place where you're at peace in your heart, walking step by step with Jesus. I love that Psalm 121, verse 5 and 6. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand, and the sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. It was always, it says there. So it was always there. Never did the Lord leave them or forsake them. And of course, in Christ, we saw the glory. Remember on the Mount of Transfiguration in Luke chapter 9, verse 34 and 36, while he was saying this, the cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were fearful as they entered the cloud. And a voice came out of the cloud saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom hear him." When the voice was ceased, Jesus was found alone, but they kept quiet, and no one told any of those things that they had seen. And then, of course, in Acts chapter 1, verse 9, and when he had spoken these things while they watched, he was taken up, and the cloud received him out of their sight. And so Jesus said, it's better that I go away, because it's not one person with you, but the glory of the Lord is with every single believer, and in every believer as well.